So, two things before we get into the content and the meat of today's video. Firstly, I'm making this video because of a conversation I saw on the Buffalo Sabres subreddit that really opened my eyes to just how happy this entire conversation makes me feel. Secondly, I'm a lot happier to be bringing you this kind of talk because this relates to the Sabres. If this conversation was still in the realm of the Vegas Golden Knights and their territory, I would not have had as much fun talking about this guy, talking about his development and the player profile he brings, because today we're talking about another one of these Vegas Golden Knights first-round picks that inevitably got traded away. Let's talk today about Peyton Krebs and the entire development path he has gone through the past few seasons. Now, the reason I'm making the comparison to another player that you probably are aware of, Mitch Marner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, is because of a post on the Sabres subreddit that I wanted to go over here in this video and also talk about the top comment that was pinned over there. But before we get into that, let's go over Krebs and his profile in general. Peyton Krebs, as we said, a first-round guy, 17th overall in the 2019 NHL Entry Draft by the Vegas Golden Knights. Back in that time span, you could say that Krebs probably should have gone a lot earlier in the draft, as he had a consolidated ranking of around... okay, what is that, 9th-ish overall? He was ranked 6th by Elite Prospects, 8th by ISS, 6th again by Future Considerations, 8th by McKean's, 10th by Bob McKenzie, and he was the 10th ranked North American skater by NHL Central Scouting. The fact that he went 17th was kind of blasphemy, but there were some injury concerns that brought themselves up literally to the draft stage, as Peyton Krebs had to hobble his way over on crutches to get his jersey on. But he's 21 years old, 6 feet 185 as a left-handed center left-wing player, and he has his entry-level deal with the Sabres. When he was drafted by Vegas in 2019, a lot of people, myself included, saw Krebs as one of the higher-ceiling players in the entire selection of guys. This was because in the Kootenay system in 2018-19, he was over a point per game, he was a very good, very skilled playmaker as the captain of that team, and he displayed arguably the best motor amongst all the 2019 guys. He had some other players thrown in there, like Albin Greva, you had Alex Turcotte, other guys that had good motors, but Peyton Krebs certainly was near the top in that respect, and his overall offensive ceiling was that to be desired as well. I'd been saying it the entire time since this guy was drafted that he was an absolute steal at 17th overall, alongside of the 15th overall Cole Caulfield and the 16th overall Alex Newhook. These guys all probably should have gone a lot earlier, but all things considered, they went where they went, and this is where they are now. Krebs eventually spent some time marinating in Vegas before getting sent over to Buffalo in the Jack Eichel trade, where in this most recent season's worth of play, he was a point-per-game guy in the Rochester American system in the AHL, and he had 22 points in 48 games played in his first full NHL stint. Now, I say full, not necessarily full. He played half the year, he was pretty good in half the year, but next season should be his very first full NHL season, with hopefully no AHL time in between. This is the Reddit post that I wanted to highlight here in this video from Dauber Hockey. It's on the Sabres subreddit. Dauber just released the complete 2022-2023 hockey guide on their website. Here is the write-up about Peyton Krebs. Dauber's lowdown on Krebs. This highly touted prospect is on the right development curve for fantasy owners, progressing quickly and enjoying success with each step. 2 years ago, he showed he had nothing more to learn at the junior level. Last season, he showed that the AHL isn't a challenge either. In the NHL, Krebs has been productive at an increasing rate, which is, again, what fantasy owners had hoped. He had 5 points in the first 21 games of 21-22, and then 17 points in the next 36. The expectation is that he will approach 50 points this season or next, linger around that pace for 2 years, and then push past 70 as a first-line star for the Sabres. Now, you've been seeing that word pop up here in this post, fantasy. When you walk by every night talking sweet and looking fine, I get kind of hectic inside. Okay, no, we're not talking about that, Mariah Carey fantasy, but fantasy hockey owners, that's what they're talking about here when it comes to the long-term projectability of NHL prospects that eventually become NHL stars, and whether or not they would actually bode well when it comes to producing fantasy points in your fantasy leagues. Now, I don't know the demographic of the YouTube viewers on this channel that have fantasy leagues or that specifically have Peyton Krebs as fantasy players in their teams, but for a lot of Sabres fans who are paying attention to this video, I don't think you really care about the fantasy. You just care about the realistic projection and play of Peyton Krebs himself. I actually really do like the estimate that Dauber goes out there and says here, hey, the guy had X amount of points in the last few games of the season here. He had 22 and 48 in general. Let's see him potentially get 50 points next season. If not, next season, stay around 50 points in that range when he's hitting, let's say, 23 and 24 years old, before pushing past 70 points and beyond when he's in his prime, 25, 26, 27. Now, I know it's really easy to say that NHL prospects and rookies eventually become that good, but there are a lot of situations where prospects just don't end up becoming first-line stars. For Krebs, though, I really do want to believe in the potential that this guy has, because ever since the guy was like 16, 17 years old, I was one of the biggest believers in his game because of all those skills that we had mentioned earlier, and it's why I'm saying here to you now that, yeah, I'm so much happier to be talking about this guy in this way than if he was a Vegas Golden Knights prospect still, because, yeah, Vegas does not need to get any more good players, thank you very much. Plus the fact that there was the trade, there was Alex Tuch in there, you also have Dylan Cousins and Jack Quinn and Rasmus Dahlin and Power, and hey, the Sabres have themselves a very good-looking squad. By the time 2025, 2026, 2027 rolls around, Peyton Krebs is going to be a part of that too. Now, the reason I made this video titled the way it is because the first comment on this Reddit post from Major Minor Minor says, Mitch Marner-lite. I'm in. And you know, I don't want to go out there and say that Peyton Krebs is going to be Mitch Marner. That's not what I'm going to say here at all. Marner, by the time he was 19, 20 years old, made the NHL and he was putting up 60 points in a year. He also is one of the most overpaid players, or not overpaid, but he's just one of the most paid players in general in the entire National Hockey League today. So saying that Peyton Krebs, or anybody for that matter, is going to be the next Mitch Marner, that's a pretty big task, I feel. Plus the fact that Marner literally had 97 points in 72 games this recent NHL season. He would have been a 100-point guy had he played the full year. Peyton Krebs, though, is in a position where, even though he has not had the same development path as Marner, I definitely do see a lot of the same skills in his game. As we had noted, earlier on in Krebs' career, especially as a member of the Kootenay Ice, he was just an absolutely astounding playmaker. A guy that could make some damage on the perimeter by dangling by guys, opening up space, and throwing it across for cross creases. As we know from Mitch Marner, he is also one of the most talented playmakers in the entire NHL today. However, he does have a little bit more of a goal-scoring side that has developed over the past few years as well. I definitely do think that Krebs and Marner hold on to the puck in similar ways, and you can kind of see the finesse in their gameplay and how similarly they translate across the board here. Another point to contention is the fact that Marner once in a while plays on the penalty kill, and for Peyton Krebs, I don't necessarily know if they plan to put him on that role right away, but when it comes to his work ethic, his defensive responsibility, and his desire to just do things properly, I definitely could see Peyton Krebs potentially being a penalty killing option for the Sabres as well. Plus the fact that he's not really going to be, quote-unquote, the only offensive star on this team as they go forward, with Cousins, with Quinn, with, I don't know, Isaac Rosen in there. You have a lot of very good players that can produce points for you to the point that you don't necessarily need to save the energy of a guy like Krebs if you have those other top 6 options that are also available at your disposal. Play Krebs on the PK, let him do what he needs to do, play well in his own zone, play well along the boards, use his work ethic to beat a race or two to get the puck out of his own zone, and go from there, because you're probably going to have some good results. So at the end of the day, when you talk about Peyton Krebs and the long-term projectability, I really do like the label of Mitch Marner-lite. I don't think Krebs is going to go out there and post up 97 points in 72 games, on pace for about 100 and whatever. I don't really think that's in the cards here, especially long-term, but at the end of the day, if Peyton Krebs maxes out as a 70, 75, 80-point guy for a few seasons in a row, I think you're laughing, especially with all the other talents that he has out there on the ice too. Not to mention the fact that he was one player out of many included in this Jack Eichel trade, which also landed the Sabres some pretty good prospects in Noah Östlund. There's a lot to like here with Peyton Krebs specifically, but the trade that sent him over to Buffalo in the first place is always one that I'm going to look at in a positive light. So talk in the comments all your thoughts about Peyton Krebs. The article will be linked in the description if you want to go ahead and click that to read. I hope you enjoyed this Juraj Rolls 99, and bye.